Hello and welcome to this video series on smart licensing for firepower devices. This series of 8 videos will hopefully help to guide you through the topic of smart licensing and how it applies to both firepower threat defense and ASA firewalls. The whole series covers the following topics: a general overview of smart licensing for both firepower threat defense and ASA, and finally smart licensing for firepower in public cloud environments. You can either watch all of the videos in order to get a full overview, or simply watch the videos that are of most interest. In this video, we'll be looking at smart licensing for firepower threat defense, or FTD. When it comes to licensing for firepower threat defense devices, there are generally 2 options. The first one is that we provide base functionality or base firewall functionality with the purchase of the firepower device that you have decided to deploy. Base functionality essentially means you get things like application visibility and control, you get the user awareness, you get the routing capabilities, network address translation, and also site-to-site VPN. So probably what most people would anticipate to be a more traditional firewall feature set. An important thing to point out here is that base licenses do not expire. The second option that we have are the advanced subscriptions. Now, these are the ones that provide our next generation capabilities. So things like our next generation intrusion prevention, our advanced malware protection, and also URL filtering. So these are subscription licenses, and they are typically term-based, and the terms range from 1 year to 3 years and 5 years. It's important to note here that the type of license that you need to apply to your device depends on the software that's being used and not on the actual hardware. For reference, I've included this table here that shows you all of the different types of licensing, the subscription license you would need to purchase if you was going to do that, and whether they are perpetual or term-based. So obviously, if you want to take a closer look at this, just pause the video and have a read through this for your reference. Moving on, we have the licensing for Firepower Management Center. Now, with our Firepower Management Center, which is our central enterprise class centralized management platform for firepower threat defense, we have 2 options. We have physical appliances and we have virtual appliances. If you're deploying a physical appliance, then the license is included and there's no activation required. When using the virtual Firepower Management Center, then it's licensed based on the number of devices it's likely to manage. So as you can see here, we've got a range of options that we have. We have licenses for 2 devices, 10, 25, or the newer 300 devices. When it comes to firepower licensing, the best thing to do is understand what it is you actually need, and what it is how many devices you're looking for, and the types of capabilities you want those devices to be able to offer. So we start with our firepower threat defense devices themselves. Remember, we get a base license included, and there is no activation required for that. And then it's just a case of deciding which feature licenses you want to deploy on top of the base. So again, we have things like the threat license for next generation intrusion prevention. We have malware licenses to provide the advanced malware protection, and we have the URL filtering licenses to give us the URL categorization control within the security policies. All of the feature licenses are subscription and term-based, and again, they are for 1, 3, or 5 years. One of the questions we tend to get is how many licenses do I need? So hopefully I've broken it down in this slide here to kind of help demonstrate and show you the number of licenses or the types of licenses that you may need to purchase. If we're starting with a physical firepower management center, the important thing here is that each device that is managed needs a license for each feature that is used. So what we mean by that is the FMC physical, obviously there's no license required. But then if we were to have 5 managed FTD devices, all of these would come with a base license included. So remember, that gives them the capabilities, things like application visibility control. It gives them the network address translation, sites like VPN, routing capabilities, and so on. That's included with the purchase of the managed device itself. Now, if we wanted to apply next generation intrusion prevention to 4 of these devices, then we would buy or purchase 4 threat subscriptions. If we want to apply advanced malware protection to 3 of these devices, then we would then purchase 3 malware subscriptions. And then finally, if we wanted to apply the URL web categorization capabilities to 3 of the devices also, then again we would purchase 3 URL subscriptions. And again, each of these subscriptions are term-based for either 1, 3, or 5 years. But what it means, and one of the advantages of smart licensing, particularly with firepower threat defense, is that those licenses can be moved around. So where you have devices that perhaps don't have the threat subscription enabled, if one of your other firewall devices that does have the threat license enabled suddenly or no longer requires that capability because it's been deployed somewhere else, then that threat license can be reapplied to other devices within your environment. So there's no real requirement to purchase a 5th threat subscription, providing only 4 of the devices you have in this scenario are ever going to use the threat subscription capability. Now, when it comes to high availability and clustering, again, this is usually one of the top questions that we have around licensing. So for FMC high availability, so for the Firepower Management Center, the FMC high availability operates in an active standby mode, and as you can see here, there's no special license required. You purchase your FMCs in terms of your active and your standby device, and you essentially configure them to be HA. There is no license that enables them to become a HA pair. For the actual managed devices themselves, so the actual firewall devices, appliances that are on the wire applying policies, again, there is no special license required to establish or enable a firepower threat defense HA pair. You obviously have to purchase 2 devices, and each device within that HA pair must have the same number and type of feature licenses applied. So if you want to do URL filtering, for example, then both of those appliances would require a URL license. And the same for when it comes to clustering. So for our largest end appliances, so for example in the 4100 or 9300 series, again, there's no license required to enable or establish the cluster, but each device or security module within the cluster again must have the same number and type of feature licenses enabled. So again, if we're using the IPS capabilities, for example, the threat license, if you want to employ or deploy the next generation intrusion prevention capabilities throughout the cluster, then in this case where we have 3 devices, each device or each security module needs to have the threat license. So you would need to purchase 3 threat licenses in that case. So just to kind of illustrate that, we have the FTD high availability licensing. So again, the same licenses are required for each device, and also your FMC must be registered with the Cisco Smart License Authority as well. So in this case, you can see that we have our primary FTD, which has a base plus a threat license. When we add our secondary FTD, it comes as standard with the base license, but we also must purchase a threat license so that that can then be applied to the secondary device as well. So now that HA pair of FTD devices has the same license entitlement. So if the primary fails, the secondary can continue with the same configuration and the same license capabilities. The same applies for clustering. Again, the FMC must be registered with the Smart License Authority, and we need the same number of licenses and or the same types of licenses for each device or security module within the cluster. So in this case, you can see we have our 3 devices. They all come with the base license, but they also, if we want to apply the threat and malware capabilities, then we need to make sure that we have 3 threat licenses and 3 malware licenses as well. For those of you that are using or thinking about using the multi-instance capability within our 4100 and 9300 range of appliances, again, there are no special licenses required here to enable multi-instance itself. We also have now the ability to do multi-instance clustering and HA, and each device or security module again has the base license included as standard. Each device or security module within the multi-instance would require a feature license for the features that you want to enable. So again, if you want to enable threat or malware or URL, you would need to make sure that each device or security module has a license to do that. The difference here is that all instances within that device or security module, so this is the multi-instance capability now, so all of the instances that are configured within that particular device or security module will share the feature licenses that have been assigned to that security module. So if you have as you can see here, for example, a Firepower 4100, and you have deployed, let's say, 4 instances in there, you don't need to purchase 4 threat licenses, because you've already purchased a threat license for the actual Firepower 4100 device. Then that threat license is shared between the instances that you deploy in that particular scenario. The only thing that we say is that the licenses must be assigned to each instance within the actual user interface. So again, but that's the part of the standard deployment. When you configure and deploy a firewall device, you need to assign a license to it so that it knows what its capabilities and what its entitlements are. But again, there is no requirement to purchase a threat license for every instance that you deploy, just for every device or security module where instances will be deployed. Now, there are scenarios as well for multi-instance where you might have multiple FMCs managing different instances within the same chassis. These FMCs are separate from each other and would be managing different instances within the platform. So the only caveat here is that when you're using multiple FMCs to manage different instances, then each of those FMCs must have sufficient licenses installed for each security device or module. So in that case, if we have 2 security devices and we want to enable threat and malware, then each of those 3 FMCs would also need to have the threat and malware licenses assigned to them. So just to close out, I wanted to finish with just to give you an example scenario. So here we have a customer deployment where they want to deploy a single hardware FMC to manage 3 individual Firepower threat defense appliances. 2 of those devices are going to require next generation intrusion prevention, and 1 device will require advanced malware protection and URL filtering. So in terms of the license requirements, there's no license required for the FMC. The base licenses, remember, for the 3 FTD devices are included as part of the purchase, and then you would simply need to add on 2 threat subscriptions for next generation intrusion prevention and one subscription each for both malware and URL subscriptions. And again, as a reminder, you can choose to go for 1, 3 or 5 years. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful. Please take some time to view the other videos that we have in this series, as well as all of the other content that we have on offer. Bye for now.